Okay, so, all right. So, thanks for tuning in today to Pink Panther Presents, an author talk with Kim Suhr. And special thanks to Pink Panther Magazine and the Detroit Writers Guild for making these talks possible. Today's author talk features Kim Suhr, who is author of Nothing to Lose, Cornerstone Press 2018, Maybe I'll Learn, Snapchats of a Novice Mom, 2012, and co-author of the As Told To memoir, Ramon, An Immigrant's Journey. She holds an MFA in fiction from the Solstice program at Pine Manor College, where she was the Dennis Lehane Fellow. Her writing has appeared in various publications. Kim is director of Red Oak Writing, where she leads writers' roundtable critique groups, provides manuscript critiques and coaching, and leads the summer creative writing camps for youth. When she isn't writing, she enjoys gardening, time outdoors with her family, and being a fangirl for her grown children in their various pursuits. So welcome, Kim.
Thanks, Jen. I'm so happy to be here. It's fun to talk with you again.
I know. I love, you're one of my favorite writers to talk to.
Oh,
I say that seriously.
yeah.
So
Well, you too.
yeah, so I would like to, so sometimes I talk in metaphor too, but I think that hopefully people can appreciate the images that I present in some of these. But I'd like to open our talk with some backstory on our literary book-length publication history. So watching your publication journey in 2018 with your short story collection, Nothing to Lose, was enviable. And while both of us, our first publication was coming out with small presses, my own experience kind of made me feel like I was isolated on a desert island, and you appeared to be sailing into the sunset on a celebration cruise. And I say that with love, right? And I loved witnessing that. And I loved the production part in the community celebration of your book. And I'm glad that I got to see it, even if I wasn't experiencing it, because it let me know that it exists. And it kind of filled me with some kind of deferred hope, but it filled me with some hope that's right. That's how the experience could be. And I was taking notes. So, in the future, there will be lots of strategies that I will be able to borrow for future projects from just watching you go through that. But what was it like to publish with a teaching press like Cornerstone?
It was delightful and wonderful. And I think probably the word that jumps to my head first is it was collaborative. This press, it's directed by Dr. Ross Tangadal, who's an English professor at UW-Stevens Point. And he kind of inherited this press that started in 1983 and kind of put out one book a year, 2 books a year for a lot of years, and got students a chance to get the experience of the publication world, publishing world. But I think under Ross, and I don't know what happened before Ross, but I think under Ross, they've just kind of, it's like they're on steroids, and they're like, these students are getting soup to nuts as far as publishing experience, and they were wide open to my needs and wants and quirks. And they were just delightful. And I think part of what was so wonderful about it is they were earnest and eager and very professional. And Ross trusted them in a way that I think some adults might have trouble with. And I think my teaching background, I've worked with adolescent writers and adult writers for a long time. I know what folks in that part of their lives are capable of. So I trusted them too. And they just rose to the challenge. It was delightful. And there's nothing wrong with having people on your team who are tech savvy.
Yes.
And so they were posting Instagram stuff and all of that kind of stuff. So it was wonderful. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. And really, like, the authors that they're taking on are fantastic. Patricia Ann Mcnair was the most recent one with her collection of short stories, and Joe, who was before her, Joe O'Malley, Escapes from Detroit, I think is the name of his short story collection.
Okay.
Suzanne Davis came before me, and she's just a delightful writer. And you kind of, as you read these, you start to see kind of a thread of themes and things like that. So I was grateful to have had it happen, and kind of lucky also. So
Absolutely. Which in a great way. I hope to
mhm.
right, it's like the dream. You hope to see people have that experience, especially for, I mean, it wasn't your first publication, but first short story collection in in the literary world is, it's a big deal. And it's super hard, right? It's very hard to promote um literary, short works, literary collections. And I loved seeing, so I wish that I had those educational opportunities also. So I also watched on with envy, like when I was an undergrad, I had to keep creating like opportunities for myself. I would say, "Oh, I really want to do this." And someone would say, "Well, why don't you start that?" And then it was like, I'm trying, or so I would start it, and then everybody would be coming to me saying, "Well, can we do this with you?" And it's like, okay, not only am I trying to learn it and teach it myself, I'm also teaching other people, which was a different kind of a magical experience. But that is very frustrating when you write trial and error, or you get, 2 years down the road and you're like, oh my God, we were doing that all wrong.
Right.
There's a better way to do that. But I learned a ton doing that anyway. And obviously it led me to the magazine that I now, edit and publish. But even with that, I wish I would have had somebody with a lot more wisdom and knowledge about how these things work, kind of teaching me the way and saying, right, and kind of like apprenticeship. I talked about this on the last um, author talk. I'm just talking about the importance of apprenticeship and just right helping people learn the nuances and the technology. Right? And I'm sure you learned some stuff too about just watching them go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and they had a framework or a structure. I think that's,
Mm.
even if you don't have all the know-how, to have that structure that you can move into, I think saves a lot of legwork along the way. And that was built up over the years that the press existed before them. So
That's every time I hear you talk about them too, I learn a lot more about the press, which is also super exciting. So you and I have had the privilege of sitting on panels together, talking
mhm.
about writing. And my favorite time was when we were celebrating Bonnie Jo Campbell's Renegade Characters and their inspiration on our own work. As we develop storylines with flawed and rebellious characters in these, interesting, almost, twist on the mundane kind of situations. What most inspired me about your collection are the imperfect characters whose deferred desire and expectation are the very things that keep them from sinking in their own self-doubt. These misfits are often so relatable, it's hard to deny our likeness to them at times. And I found myself doing that. Like sometimes I'd be like, oh, this person, oh, that's horrible. And then it's like you see your own reflection in them. It's just like, ouch. But what inspired some of these standout stories and characters?
And then I want to ask you how you go through, because I'm interested in that too. For me, everything starts with a premise. And it can often take me a really long time to get from premise to character to story. And so I'll start with the kernel of an idea, or like the opening story, Night Vision. It like, I just had a vision. For some reason, I woke up in the middle of the night and I looked in the doorway, and there was someone standing there with night vision goggles on. This was not really true.
Okay, good.
But I was envisioning this. I don't probably half dream. And, I was lying there thinking, that person would want to harm me,
Hmm.
but that's not a real story. The real
Right.
story is if that person doesn't want to harm me, what's going on? And so, of course, I wouldn't want to write that story from my perspective. I'd want to write it from his. And so that's kind of how that one came to me. So it's premise first, and then character, and then story. Then it's like, well, what is the story here? What's going to be the arc and all of that? The Trolley Ween one, it's called How We Got Our Baby. There was this thing, it's a thing in one of the cities near where I live. It's called Trolley-ween, and adults basically dress up in costumes, bar hop on Halloween. And I had recently moved to this very quiet exurb subdivision place that is very much not urban Trolley-ween. But I thought, what if what if Trolley Bean came here? What would it look like? And what would happen to those people as they went on that? And so that was, again, premise. And then like, okay, who are the characters? Well, the characters have to be like me, fish out of water, stumbling into this weird tradition, and then what happens when we're on it. So it's really, I think that's kind of how it goes, is it's, you know, premise, character, story. And
I
a
like
lot of
that.
times they're not me in any way. And,
Right.
you know, my exploration of these people who are different from me is the fun of it, because I want to understand them.
Absolutely.
And you too, you tackle gritty characters that, you know, make us think about ourselves differently too. What's your process?
So, and I have a few processes. I'm actually trying to, you just made me think about Elkie Brooks, who's I'm studying her TED Talks right now, and I teach some of them. And she writes about characters that aren't her at all. And sometimes, you know, she gets a little backlash for not even bringing in characters of her own ethnicity and her own, you know, for the regions that she's from. And I liked something you just said, just kind of resonated with me, that you talked about the fish out of the water. And I don't, you know, I try to bring some of my own experience into situations where it fits, but I don't start a story saying, oh, I want to write about that time that this happened to me, but I want to inject it into characters and things like that. Like that feels forced. And so you know, I do write a lot about the woman struggle. And when I first started writing, you know, I got a lot of backlash from people that I know who aren't literary people, who were like, can't you write more like Danielle Steele? And I'm like, no, I can't. And so, you know, and I still get that backlash, but I think that my writing has kind of grown to kind of encompass like more of that hope deferred. So even if it's not right, so if everything isn't resolved, that trajectory is kind of set. And as you know, smart readers, they'll follow that along and know that life is real, and like our stories end when we die. And so right, life, so I might be on the trajectory toward this, but like I think about my daughter 3 years ago went in for brain surgery, right? That wasn't on the plan. And so, you know, so we can get things going, but then life matters and things get in the way. But as far as like inspiration, I do keep a journal. And you know, when I do get to sit down and write, I feel like I'm a criminal stealing time. Sometimes I'm kind of like being creative, looking like I'm busy doing something else so that nobody tries to scrutinize that she's doing something that doesn't make us money, right? I say that half joking, but you know what I mean.
Like, you shouldn't tell the audience that that's the case, but yeah, I get it. I get it.
So, you know, I haven't had as much time this year to sit down and work on my fiction and stuff, which or I shouldn't say that, work on all my writing, my fiction, my creative nonfiction, and my poetry. And there are certain things during the year that force me to sit down and polish up work or develop new work. And those are like contests that I love participating in my own writing communities. And I just found out right before I got on that a piece from, so it's a lyrical, it started off as a poem, but I started changing it into a lyrical, like a little prose poem kind of a thing. I submitted it to my alma mater for a creative nonfiction, and it took first place. And I was like, you know, it earns a little money award and everything, but I was like, oh, that's so awesome. So this work that New Wilderness, that I'm trying to get published about a mother's account of her daughter's brain cancer experiences and living with mental illness, it's a piece from that collection. And I've been having a really hard time getting that stuff published. So anyhow, so I'm super excited that it's like, you know, every time something in that collection gets picked up or gets recognized, I'm like, yes, okay, it is a good work. You know how that goes too. I know it's a good work, but you know what I mean. But I keep a journal of like concepts and topics and relational dynamics and settings and things that I hope to explore. But I also, kind of similar to what you were saying, I wallow in the complexity of a good story idea, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. And I'm constantly thinking. And so lately, I have been doing a lot of training for assault trauma advocacy. And I also work with a sex trafficking and sexual exploitation group. And in a lot of the trainings, I get a lot of, so here I have like my oppressed woman kind of focus and the stubborn silences that we keep. And then I start working on this stuff. And so a lot of my new work is dealing with trafficking victims. And I just started working on a short story collection, and it might be a hybrid of some poetry also, I'm just really not sure, but short story collection on their stories. And kind of, and as I started thinking, Jennifer Jean just published, right, her poetry collection and the companion workbook for helping survivors right through their trauma. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm doing that too. So I can't wait to kind of really connect with her and talk more in depth. I'm sure she'll be on an author talk in the future, but that's kind of, a combination of the things that I see real people, and, a lot of times I do witness things, and I try to bring integrity to their experiences. And so, like, but I mean, some of the stories too are like, I think about your night vision story and some of the other stories that are in that collection, like Solstice published that. And I was working, well, I'm still working with them, but I was working with Lee in particular on some fiction stuff when that got published. And I just remember like thinking, wow, right? Like, this is awesome, because these pieces they take risks.
Oh,
And and so those are harder pieces to place
yeah.
because they take certain risks. And so so that's kind of encouraging too, to keep doing that thing, keep writing.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. Well, we can't all be Danielle Steele, apparently. Hey, before you move on, Stubborn Silences We Keep. Stubborn Silences, that is an amazing title for something somewhere down the road.
I have one. I have a short story and poetry and video collection of that title.
Oh, cool.
And I'm trying to get it published, and I just went through and reorganized it, and now I've just stopped because I realize it's not realized yet. And so there are a couple of stories that I need to write, and I kind of have, again, I'm wallowing in the complexities of some of them, where I see some holes and I say, okay, there's a gap here in the arc here, and I need to bring that in. So I'm hoping to work on some short fiction, some more of that in there, because I feel like those, like, then you can get more lyrical with it, and then it kind of blends that, the poetry with the prose, and then I'm like, okay, find a publisher.
Yeah, listening to you, it reminds me of, I listened to the Neil Gaiman masterclass, and he talks about some things that he had as ideas when he was 20 years old.
Wow.
And just knew that he wasn't the writer to write them yet, and wrote them 20 years later. Now, I hope that for both of us that it's not 20 years until that, but I thought, that's a really mature thing to be able to recognize.
Yeah.
And to be patient enough to just say, it's a great idea, but I'm not the writer to write it yet. And so I'm going to do these other things first. And all those other things added to what it became. I can't remember which piece it was, but it was something that went on to have very, very.
No, I love that. And I don't know your whole backstory, but my backstory is I came back to college in my 30s and decided to not pursue and finish my architectural engineer degree. Decided I wanted to go back to the first degree that they they said, oh, don't get that degree. Nobody does anything with an English degree. And they pushed me into, which I loved, the table, I loved all of the manual stuff about architecture and engineering, but I did not like all of the digital programming stuff. And so once I started getting into that, I was like, I don't want to do this behind a desk all day. And then I fell out of college. So when I went back, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to go into writing. And, and I'm still wondering, no, I don't. But a couple of years ago, I was like, what the heck did I do to myself? But now I see things coming together, and I'm like, okay, and I have some news to come back to, but I don't want to share it yet. But so I see things, coming together, and then, and it's like, I'm like, okay, I was supposed to do this thing. But there are times where I think, oh my God, if I had started when I was 20, right? You see the inaugural poet, right? 22 years old, and she's like, and I'm so happy for her. But again, an enviable thing, right? It's like, whoa, okay, now this is awesome, because it opens up, right, so much interest for all of us. But how exciting for her, right? That somebody's recognizing her at such a young age, and what that will mean for her, right? That we don't know. And so it'll be exciting to watch her journey. But then you can't help but look at people and say, if I had started in my 20s, where would I be now? And I don't know about you, but as I approach 50, I'm like, I feel like I should be farther. And then I talk to women who are in their 50s, and they're like, no, honey, everything started to happen once I turned 50. And then I was like, Oh, okay. So don't freak out because that's just, that is more normal than, it's probably the norm, and the exception are these other examples of, younger individuals who hit their stride right away. But I bet they'll look back 20 years from then, right? You can talk to anybody. I remember Joseph Komuniaka talking about some of his earlier work, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something, and then I'm thinking Philip Levine. I got to see some of these people who came to visit the college, and Philip Levine was like, I'm not the same person.
Right.
And so, right, looking back, and do you edit that work? No, you let it, it's a, right, it's an artifact of that time in my life and the way I saw things. And I was like, that's a really, right. I don't think he used the words artifact, but that's kind of what, they both were saying, like, that is, I was just a different person. And so of course my writing, it's not a matter of, is it good, better, or was it worse? I was just a completely different person. And yeah, of course, anybody gets skills after 20 years of doing something.
Right. Well, but I don't remember the source of this either, but the whole idea that, like, yes, as you go on in your life, you become a better and better and better writer. But like, if you were a figure skater, that trajectory would not be the same, your
Right.
knees give, your back gives out, whatever. And so what a beautiful thing that, you can not only do this for 50 years, but you can also pick it up at 50 and, you got stuff to offer still. It's pretty cool.
Right. And we don't have, I mean, we have, like, I tell my kids, I'm kind of excited that I don't have, like, think about retirement. Like, I can't imagine having too much time on my hands. Like, I don't know that my life would ever reach that point, but maybe it will. I hear it happens. But I think, like, I have, as long as my mind is capable, that I have this, this blessed ability to be able to continue doing things that I love, and helping and getting ahead, but helping other people do it also, until I can't, right? Until my last breath, maybe. And that's kind of exciting to think about. I mean, we're both kind of students of, right, of good writing, and that's kind of exciting to think about. And so, like, in thinking about that too, like how, learning and growing, but we can both agree, I'm sure, that most writers are good readers, first and foremost, but they're continued good readers, not just like, oh, well, first you read and you study and then you go and do. It's not the same. I don't think for any art either, because there's so many things to learn, but also be inspired by. And so what does your reading list look like over the years? Who inspired? I know, and I made a short list of just the ones that kind of led up to a big inspiration moment. And then, like, because I was like, it's exhaustive.
Yeah, and I read all over the place, and I remember very little of it, sadly. I'll remember like what color the cover was and if I liked it, maybe who wrote it. But I think when I think about like works that have affected me or influenced how I write, I think they're all short story collections that really used the form to its best advantage. Like, I think sometimes people that don't write or read short stories think of them as short novels. Like they're just a shortened version of a novel. And that's so not true. They're so different. They rely on the reader to do at least half, if not more, of the work. That's why I love reading them, because I get to be active in the creation of this thing. So the types of like writers that I think have probably influenced me, though I don't think I write like any of them, but I do wish I could. I love Isabella Allende's short stories. I just read them and my mouth drops open. How does she do that? I studied Flannery O'Connor quite a bit. And it's not love hate with her, but there's like, I'm amazed by some of the things she can do, and I scratch my head about others. George Saunders, both not only as a writer, he's amazing, but I also love him as a teacher, like finding his videos on YouTube and that sort of thing. I just started a short swim in a pond or something, where he's turned his classes into a book. And so he's analyzing the Russian short stories and why they're working and how they're working. And I adore that. Love Alice Munro, who just, she takes regular old people and validates them on the page and makes you think about them. So I think those are probably the short story writers, short story kind of, or short stories writers, the kind of folks that really embrace the form.
But
So
that's so interesting that I see, and maybe that's too. How long have you been writing or studying writing?
my whole life,
Okay.
seriously, probably the last 20 years, maybe.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I went back to school 12 years ago, this May, and my experience was a little bit different. I just kind of fell into it. I was like, it was very haphazard, asking people this and that and trying to find my way around. And so I wasn't really looking at form. So it's very interesting listening to you talk. So and then my list is a little bit longer, but these are like the names, and some of them you're saying, I was like, oh yeah, that too. But these are the initial people who I was reading all of their like shorter and longer works, and just thinking about characters and setting and just situational things and craftsmanship also, like trying to figure out like what are they doing craft wise, and deconstructing their stuff. And so obviously Poe was the first one that got my attention. And it was like I was reading classics before I went back to school, but then I had gone to a bookstore and I picked up a couple of his short story collections, and that was kind of like a light switch for me, Poe. And then I started reading Marquez, Borges, Cortázar, Allende, Murakami, and all those magic realism, Kafka. And then it was like, whoa, right? Everything was changing. But then I was reading even, like Chopin, Shelley, Updike, Carver, Jackson, Walker, right? O'Connor, O'Brien, like talk about like I'm all over the place. And again, looking at craftsmanship, I guess looking at form, but not, I didn't learn that as much as like listening to you talk, and I wish I would have, but I was just getting into the story and thinking about the dynamics of what happens in a really condensed space. And of course, I was working on my poetry as well at the same time. And I remember having a couple teachers who were like, you can't be good at both. And I was like, oh, I was like, okay, but I'm writing both. And it's true, my fiction was better first. But my undergrad degree, more of the classes were focused on fiction, not on poetry. So that's why when I went to grad school, I was like, I'm going to do a poetry focus and really work on my poetry while I'm not neglecting my fiction either. And so they were going back and forth. And so now I look at my work and I'm like, I mean, I'm probably not the best judge of, but I don't think one sucks, like it's suffering, like one sucks and one got better. I was like, I think some writers just have different sensibilities. And as much as I do hope to do, full length, right? I've written a novel, it's the worst thing ever written. But I hope to write, novel length works, or even novellas. Like DeLint was somebody who I was reading a ton of his novellas. But I'm okay with trying to get the distilled moment. And what that means in fiction and what that means in poetry is different. But I think that both of those styles of writing are definitely enhanced by my time with both. And I feel like focus. So like where things are a lot more concrete, where I used to be a little bit more abstract with my poetry, with my fiction, there was a little bit of mystery that like, okay, you got to give your readers a little bit more here because, right, you got to make them care. They have to understand what you're trying to do here. And so I think, working on some of those little nuances helped me. But what changed everything for me was Bonnie Jo Campbell. She came to campus. She was in several of my classes. I think she was in 3 of my classes that day because I was finishing up my undergrad degree. So I was at the end of the line, and I had literature classes and workshops, and she came and visited 3 of them. And the first one she walked into, and maybe it was because I was the only other mature woman in the room, she sat down next to me like we were long lost friends. She reached out, put her hand on me, and she started talking to me. And I thought, I was not expecting that warm reception. And she started asking me about my own writing. And it's not that she was just with me. She was waiting for other people to sit down. And she was such a force in that room. And I just remember her encouraging me. And she didn't say this, but I'm the kind of person who I think in metaphors, and that helps me remember moments. And she is kind of like that first person that gave me a license to write from the grit of the soul. If I could sum up how she made me feel, it was like, it's okay to do that. As a matter of fact, the world needs that desperately. We need to look at the outcasts and the people who are treated like disposable characters. They're human beings, and right, and so they deserve, and they're interesting, and we can see ourselves in them, and we can see, right, and we want to fix the broken humanity. We have to be able to get into that human condition, and we got to get our hands dirty. And so, so she kind of gave me that license, and then coming to the Solstice MFA, while I was working with poets, I still was very strategic and loved and was so inspired by, and I know there are too many to name, but there are 3 writers there that really fiction writers, which was Laura Williams McCaffrey, Robert Lopez, and Stephen Huff, and their work. So it's not just the learning, right? Like looking at their work and seeing the fruit of what they're teaching, and being able to, I just felt so encouraged, like, okay, keep writing those tough stories, keep scratching away at the walls of this thing, and just do it.
Right. I did not know Bonnie Jo Campbell until after I had graduated, actually, from Solstice. And as I was reading her, my husband was in the room, and I said, I think it's good that I didn't read her first, because I could be, and not that I'm anywhere near her caliber, but there's something about the sensibility of her writing that I thought I could be accused of copying, because I feel like we both kind of tend to look at the same, maybe that's it. Maybe that's just it. We just tend to look at the same type of folks and try to wear their skin for a while. I don't know what it is, but
I think you're humble. I think you're writing at the caliber of these writers, and it's inspiring. I mean, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now if I wasn't excited about your work and wanting other people to be excited about your work.
Well, thank you. I think our, that whole reach should exceed our grasp thing is just fine with me.
Right. And so I'm trying to like figure out like what we want to talk about next, but I just want to make sure I didn't. Okay, good. I want to make sure I didn't like skip over. I'm like kind of skipping around a little bit, but so kind of something, let's see. All right, so that's all right. So I'm backing up just a little bit. So when we're thinking about writing community, right? Obviously, it's vital to both of us. That's probably what drew us to the particular MFA program that we both went to, and other things, right? Other parallels that we have. So this past year's kind of put a little bit of distance in my own writing community interactions. Usually I co-direct the Detroit Writers Guild with Detroit poet ML Liebler, who's been an invaluable mentor to me on learning a lot of different things about cultivating a diverse writing community and hosting events and things like that. And then I usually do like our Dirty Half Dozen and other workshops with people that we haven't been doing regularly. And because I'm so zoomed out, I sometimes just don't go to any more Zoom meetings, which is, it's really sad. And it's not like me. And I don't have it, just like I was saying before we started, I feel like I have this mush brain, and sometimes I just feel so like, bleh, where I'm like, if I have to sit behind the screen with the camera going one more time, I'm going to lose it. I mean, I'm teaching on Zoom, I'm doing meetings on Zoom, and I'm sure everybody's in the same boat. And I also suffer from seasonal depression disorder too. So this is the time of the year where that starts to lift away. And I'm working on, changing my atmosphere, sitting outside when I can and things like that, where it's like, who cares if you're sitting behind the screen because you're outside and, things like that. But I feel like very disconnected. And I am looking for like these author talks and even like attending some virtual events, which face-to-face is much better. But I did the Palm Beach Poetry Festival this year in January, and it was a fabulous experience. And in doing that, right before I went, I sat down like a criminal and wrote a couple of pieces, and then also got inspired with a couple of ways to revise those and developed probably the strongest closing piece in my collection, New Wilderness. And so I would say that a lot of really great things happened during that time, which I really kind of needed to jumpstart my work on your own personal work. And it's okay, right? Take a little bit of time, and it's okay to take time off, but take a little bit of time for your own work. And that kind of got me going back on my projects, but it's, I feel still a little bit disengaged. And so what does your current writing community life look like? And how has this evolved and shifted over the years, or maybe even during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually listening to you talk, like, I feel like I want to offer a blanket apology to every bookstore and author event that I signed up for in Zoom and did not attend. And I think it's the same thing. It's like the intention is good, but by the time that time rolls around and, so if, and now I'm doing one that other people can blow off. So maybe that's karma, and that's good. So I don't know, but I'm totally with you on that. I think the pandemic has really refocused, something. It changed what I think the importance of a writing community, not changed, but it maybe expanded it. And like pre-pandemic, I would have said writing community is about the people that you share your work with for criticism or feedback. I mean, that would have been, and the question, do you have a writing group, Kim, would have been, do I have people to give me feedback on my work? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. And I'm kind of in a place right now where my online group that you are in, that, we're not sharing work right now. My in-person people are kind of all fragmented as well. But I've through Red Oak, and I like, it was a week into the pandemic, and I said, I got to keep these people connected to each other. So I'm going to just do a Monday morning check-in. It's going to be free. It's going to be on Zoom. I had to like do some one-on-one tutorials to help people get themselves into Zoom and, whatever.
Right.
And I didn't know how long I would do it. So I think the first meeting I set up was for 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks came and went, and we were still, and so, it's a wonderful way to start the week. I make everybody say something to start out with, so we hear everybody's voice at least once, and it's usually a small, not intimidating thing to share. And then, sometimes I bring a topic that I think might be worthwhile to talk to other writers about. Sometimes people have questions on their mind that they'd like to hear, what did you all do about trying to find an agent? Or, how do you get through the time when you don't have ideas? What do you do instead? Or we talked about literary citizenship or whatever. And so I feel really grateful to be able to provide that place for other writers. And the truth is, I'm providing it for myself, because once a week I'm with other people and we're talking about writing, and we're not getting feedback. We're not either saying, I didn't have time to write this week and I feel so guilty and I should be doing this because I'm locked down and I have nothing but time. Why am I not creating? That's not part of the conversation. We're talking about writing. So I've expanded what that means, what writing community means. And I'm excited about that. And it's interesting to think about now as we move back into real life, whatever that's going to be, can there be a version of this? Or, I think some of the things that I'm doing online are going to continue online, and some things are going to move back in person. But I've really been I'm so grateful that these kinds of things are available, that we can stay connected. And people talk about that Monday like it's my touchstone. It's, it's my salvation. It's the thing that, gets me through. So
it's a lifeline.
Yeah.
And I feel like as I'm hearing you say like your motives, I'm thinking about, like another thing we have in common is we're mama spirits. So we wouldn't, it's like, maybe it's too selfish if I try to do this thing for myself. Right. But other people, like, they have to have this, they need this, the people who are right within my reach and under my care. And so that kind of motivates. I tell my students the same thing. Like, some of them are not tuning in, or they're not putting their camera on, and you can build your syllabus 1,000 right ways and they still don't cooperate. And some of them, it's like they're being foolish and they're hurting themselves. And some of my students, their last comments in the term are, you are one of the only people who cared about us this term. And so, they can see this happening with like the 5 or 6 students who are like, they're plugged in, they're engaged, they're like, please, right? They're like, please, and interact with me. And they show up to class, we do face-to-face, and then we do Zoom. and they show up to class and they have their cameras on and they're fully engaged, and you have the other ones who like their cameras are off, their mics are off, and they're not engaged at all. And you're like, right, they're not sick, they're not in quarantine. And I know life is hard, but it's like when you have this lifeline, you don't realize you're hurt, you're self-sabotage. You're right, you have these few things going for you and you're sabotaging it. And the other students are thriving. So I kind of wish that more of them would understand, that concept and treat it like a lifeline. But you can't, right? You can't help them. But I love your experience is backward than mine. So for me, writing community is all about all the other things that you're talking about. And like, you're lucky if you can get a workshop in there. And so, and for me, in a lot of regards, I don't have a lot of access to the, writing workshops that people are writing similarly, that they're at the same stage of their writing career. And so a lot of times, even when my undergrad years were, people would say, we'll just start a group. Well, then I'm the mentor or the coach, which is fine. I got, like all invaluable lessons and helped shape my literary citizenship character. But for me, it wasn't about the workshop. It was really when I came to, and there were a couple of people before grad school who would reach out to me, and individually we would workshop and stuff, and they were invaluable. But grad school, that whole model changed. Like, this really is the workshop you read about. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. And and that's a really exciting thing. But that's always been like a either a secondary thing, or maybe if you're really good, right, you'll get the prize. And so this has, the current times has, I would say my whole literary citizenship is not where it normally is, just because I'm not engaged. And and I was like, so doing these author talks, I can remember trying to do the first one, and Joanne and I went back and forth, and my life was just really crazy last summer, and I was trying to like free up some of my projects, which I've spent the last year freeing up projects. But my husband and I, our business is super busy. We do viral disinfectant during the whole thing. And so, right. And so, like just picking up more of that in a business where I'm like trying to get, backing out a little, and I'm like, oh, and here I am. And that's okay. But I had a full house. My oldest daughter and her boyfriend came and stayed with us for a few months, and this life was different. It looked different. And so she kept saying, don't worry about it if we started next year. And I was like, no, you don't understand. People need this. And I kind of felt like I just needed to just do it already, just start it. And I got them going, and then Christmas hit, and I just really felt yuck. And I was like, every month I'd be like, I need to start these back up. I need to start these back up. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And then I was like, that literally, I just was like, just, you were the next person who I wanted to reach out to. And I was like, just reach out to her. If we can make it work soon, if not, like just start getting lineups and, start having a plan and get that literary citizenship. And like, so you was talking about like signing up for Zooms, like, oh, I'm sorry. So I've just been saying a lot of interest. And I did sign up for 2 through one of our local libraries. And one of them is tonight. And so I keep getting the reminder. And I don't, like, I learned something from a guy from church years ago. And he said, you get all this pressure to sign up for things, even if they're free. Put your name on the list, commit. And it's a lot of pressure sometimes. And he said, he goes, I drive people nuts. I say maybe all the time. But he goes, it's not that I have a commitment issue. It's not that I'm waiting for something better to come along. You really just don't know. And I would rather at the last minute say, hey, I'm coming, or just show up, than have my name on as I'm coming and then don't show up. And so he's like, I know it's a catch, but so I have been trying to practice, like put that to practice. And so a lot I've been saying interested, but the 2 of them I said, all right, I'll register. It's like, I am committed to re-establishing a better literary citizenship, and it starts now. April it is.
Well, no, okay, so this is a great example of that. You publish other writers all the time. I mean, like, you get extra points for that. You make writers' dreams come true, really.
I forgot. So
don't forget about that.
I do. And that is funny. Like, I do forget about, like, I feel like your face has to be present in your, right, your citizenship. Like I'm a character in my own, citizenship scene. And you're right. I do. That is something that happens. And I try, I keep it on schedule, and it didn't happen this time, but when I had to move my daughter to New York, and I had all these obstacles. I also had to move my oldest daughter into an apartment in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, 2 weeks before I moved my other daughter to New York. And so I was back and forth, back and forth. And so I'm trying to put this magazine together, and you bring your laptop with you, but you're not, like, I'm hanging up pictures and putting away dishes. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to finish the magazine. It's due in a couple days. And literally so I'm so behind, and things are going wrong. And I don't want to neglect my husband, who I've said, okay, come and meet me. And I should have just locked myself down and just done it, but I didn't. I just kept saying, you guys go to the farmer market, I'll work on this, and then we'll, blah, blah, blah. And so I literally was in the car on the way home on September 8th with a hotspot going, writing the last, because I had to do a book review also, writing a book review, finishing my editor's letter. I get it done. I'm like, okay, and then I want to look at it to make sure there aren't any like big mistakes. And normally I send away for an editor's proof and all this stuff. I didn't have to, obviously, time to do that. And so I literally got home. We pull up in a parking lot to get our car. And I just say to my husband, just sit here so I can get on their Wi-Fi. I have to publish the magazine. And it was like 9:45 at night. I just like, call it a wrap, and it's live. But I was like, remember the one AWP where my computer crashed? And I was at our hotel, and I was behind the counter, and everybody kept walking up like, why the heck are you behind the counter? Because they had published it on their thing. And I was like, I have never been late with that. And I know that seems like a really silly thing. Like my best friend was like, why don't you just publish it tomorrow? And I was like, oh, like that was blasphemous. I was like, no, this has to go out today. She's like, well, people will understand. And she's like, and it's the pandemic. And I'm like, no, like, especially no, like something has to stay normal. Something has to stay on track. And I'm not going to stamp it's the pandemic on one thing if I don't have to. And so, but I felt like an insane person on that car ride. I literally was like, I cannot fail. And I don't know how I'm going to succeed, but those two things are like back and forth.
Well, so you, and I think it's so good to have boundaries, and one of your boundaries is that deadline, but maybe you learn something about the things you normally do to make it perfect. Like maybe that's a lesson or something, a takeaway is, maybe I didn't need that printed editor's copy, or maybe I did, like,
Absolutely.
or maybe I let this kind of thing go. I think there's a value in that too, because I think we get on the treadmill thinking everything has to be done a certain way, and then just to have that opportunity to say, and why does it have to be that way?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I did learn a lot about that too. And like it was a shorter edition. Like there were things that fell through, like other people who work with the magazine couldn't keep commitments, and so they were like, I'm sorry, I have to step back. And there was a lot of that happening. And I was like, okay, what do we do? Right? And so for the first time in a couple of years, I read every piece with my readers, with my editors. Yes. And it was like, sometimes I'd be like I got to read these, right, and be able to give comments and whatever else. And so that was kind of, so like all of these little things. But again, I was like, don't stress about it. If we don't get through all the submissions, like that's normal too. Like you keep reading until you have enough. And if you don't have enough, like I was like, we don't have a lead article. Tough. Right. I was like, it's still a great issue. And so there were things like that, like not getting the editor's copy. I like the editor's copy because I can see my mistakes in print better.
It's much easier to find those. That's true.
There's nothing worse than I get it in the mail and I'm like, son of a gun, like I can see this and that and this and that. And so I like to get it to see the cover art, and then, to make sure that the pixels are good. And then also to see those things. But what I did is instead I played around with size. And so I literally would zoom it to 120 and look at the art to say, okay, at 120%, does it still look good? Good enough? Okay. And I just started doing stuff like that, and then trying to edit it at different sizes to see if maybe that would give the same thing. And there were a couple of things that I found very tiny that I fixed. So I got the editor's copy, and it's like, well, 10 copies that went to print have those little things in it and the rest don't. And who cares? They were little tiny, like missing a period and things, stupid little nuances that nobody probably cares about but me. But so that also just make peace with that. Like, okay, you can still fix the mistakes, and it is what it is. And it's a self-run book. So, we're all learning different things. And that's the one thing, right? I'm constantly learning with that. But I loved it. Like the artist that the poet and artist that I featured in the September issue is a local Detroit writer. And I noticed her art and I was like, oh, I wonder. And so I was like, oh, can I publish this? And then I was like, oh, my feature artist had fallen through the cracks. Like she went like missing. And I was like, oh God, like the whole feature, all the art was picked. I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. And so then I was like, okay, don't panic, right? And then I started like looking at hers and I started trying to look for her poetry. And she's a fabulous poet. And I'm like, Olga, you don't have anything published. Like, can I publish some of your stuff too, along with your art, and do an interview? Like, why isn't anybody talking about you? So, and she's a Canadian American and Ukrainian, right? So, I mean, she's got all these like rich layers to her, talk about citizenship. And it kind of prompted her to be reminded, yes, you need to publish your work. And so she's like, I'm definitely pulling up my manuscript. I'm definitely getting serious about this. And I'm like, good, because you have a fabulous, like, you should just hear her read. She just has a fabulous reading presence, but a fabulous collection of work. And I mean, I've been listening to her for 12 years, going to different readings and stuff and running into her. And that's why I literally was like, am I spelling her name wrong? Is she using a pen name? Like, I was looking under all these different things. And finally I emailed her. I'm like, you don't have anything published, like individual pieces, and you don't have a book. And she's like, no, I know I'm really bad about that. And I was like, well, let me help you with this. And so that was a lot of fun. And I hope to work with her again. Like, I hope to work with her on the larger manuscript. That would be a blast. And we talked about it. We just haven't come back to it. But yeah, like you're right. Like, working with other writers is something I kind of forget is a part of my literary citizenship also. And it is a big undertaking, because for like 2 months out of every 6 months is like, you're like 60 to 70% focused the first month, and then you're like, oh snap, focused for the last month, like pulling from every direction. It's like, it reminds me of like a SpongeBob episode, right, where they're all like running around in his head, like trying to grab stuff and put it all in place. That's kind of how that month feels. So like 2 months out of every year feel like that craziness. And it helps me to write in different ways. So, where I don't want to be like, I'm trying to get myself from not doing the book reviews, like having other people do those, because I don't want it to all be my voice. And so, I've got to find another contributing, columnist or somebody, like maybe I'll get different contributors, but I've got to find different things to do, so it's not always my voice. So that could be something too that you're thinking about in your own literary community. If you know people who would be a good fit to, to have a regular column, or people who just want to submit, trending topics that are, that could, it doesn't have to be something, what the publication is. It doesn't have to be something that reaches all women, or it doesn't have to be about women's oppression. Like, sometimes people are like, oh, is it? And I'm like, no, it's about women's experience. So the big focus is, right, what will speak to women? What are women experiencing? It could be local, it could be global. A lot of times there's so much crossover, and, just that the woman is central, central focus in that. So thinking about supporting other writers, and that's another thing that really, that was something that attracted to me before I read your writing, right? So when I met you, just hearing about, and of course, the first time we met, I was being goofy with someone else, and and that's a whole other story, but I was having a little bit of fun being goofy, and but I was listening to you. And so something that really attracted me to you at first was, and it still continues to intrigue me, is this idea of, supporting other writers on their journey to fulfilling their dreams. And so beyond the absence of competitiveness, which I think we both can agree is really important in a healthy literary citizenship, it's inspiring to see other writers who are passionate about helping other aspiring and even established writers, I'm just going to say writers, find their way in this vast literary world. And so coaching and teaching within your writing community seems like it's an equally important in fulfilling, or they're equally important in fulfilling aspects of your writing life. What are some of the ways that you work with? I know you mentioned a few of them, but what are some other ways that you work with that maybe you haven't mentioned that you work with writers?
Yeah. So we do the Monday check-ins. Kind of the thing that I've been doing all along is roundtable critique groups, which are similar to the workshop group in an MFA program. A little bit different in that people don't read ahead. Like, they bring their work 10 pages at a time, up to 10 pages at a time. They read it. We make little in person. We make comments in the margins quickly as we can, the things that strike us. And then we have conversation after that. Now online, it's slightly different, kind of cool. I can record the discussion we have about each other's work, so people can go back and listen to what was said, as well as, using Word documents or Google Docs to type idea, answer feedback really quickly as we're going through. I started something in the pandemic that I had done kind of on and off in person before, but it's a writing prompt group. And I started it kind of with the thought of this would be the gateway into our roundtables. And, people could get some success and feel some, comfort writing with others. And then they would want to go into our roundtable group and share and get feedback. What's happened, which is just so interesting to me, is I have a number of people in this group who have no desire to become published writers at all.
Really?
They just love writing. They have no interest in sharing their work for feedback. In fact, I don't think any of them have then moved on to become, to join my roundtables. They just love being together. Talk again. I start with we do a check-in, and then I start with some sort of a reading from usually a craft book or inspiration, and kind of a grounding kind of thing. And then we do 2 to 3 writing prompts along the way. And instead of sharing their work, we just share the experience of it. So what was that like for you? Did you discover anything? Did you break the rules and try something different? And they love to talk about it and listen to each other. And they, again, it's spiritual is too strong a word, but I do feel like the community that's built there is amazing. And it was interesting today, I said, where are you zooming in from? And 2 people zoomed in from the same city. I said, you guys could live 2 blocks away from each other and not know it, but here we are on the screen, and I've got people from different states. And
I'm interested in more on this. So if you will put a comment, if this is something that you're opening up to a larger community, leave a comment in the event.
Okay.
And I'll make sure it gets reshared on the page, because that is maybe even on my writer page. I'm definitely interested in, especially because this has opened up these times have opened up way for us to, kind of do what we were already doing with our MFA, right? Fellow peers, to keep cultivating a long distance group of writers. So please do share how we can find that.
Yeah, thanks. And then I also do manuscript critiques, developmental editing, one-on-one coaching. So, and while I have not been able to generate a lot of new work during the pandemic time, I will true confessions, other people are, and they're finishing drafts of novels and drafts of memoirs, and they're all set to go. I'm happy to help, but if I'm not going to be doing my own writing, I might as well be helping them with theirs.
Yeah, sure.
So, I've been able to work with a number of writers that way, and some of them end up self-publishing, some of them hybrid, some of them are submitting to traditional. I just heard that one of them has some agent interest, which is so exciting, to see that happen. So
yeah, and that's another talk I would like to do also. So if you're interested in doing another talk in a collaborative setting about talking about agents, I was thinking of reaching out to a couple, but if you have people too in mind, let me know, because I'm thinking of reaching out to a couple people who I watch their agent journeys and their publication journeys on media. And I'm like, that's a really good discussion. I think that's a good, a good discussion to bring in kind of a roundtable kind of a way.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what's happened in that world during the pandemic, because I've heard numerous stories of I had an agent, but she's no longer agenting.
Right?
I've heard a number of those,
Yeah.
and so I don't know what that world is like right now, but it's got to be tough.
Well, I mean, yes, it is everywhere. But something you said about sharing reminds me. So I teach for the Meadowbrook Writing Project in the summer, and I work with junior high and high school kids. And some of them, are not writers. They don't want to be writers. Their parents make them go to camp, and they're very privileged kids, right? So the camp is not cheap, and it's a great environment, and I keep that in mind. So I just want to kind of encourage them to make the week whatever, make it great for them, however it is. And some of the things, like we go around and we share, and I have a policy, you can only skip one time, but you could share a couple sentences or your process. And so, because I feel like sometimes they don't know what the heck they're doing, or they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm interpreting, they get in the way of just like interpreting the prompt. I'm giving you a prompt, I want you to interpret it. What does it mean to you? Then start writing. And they are so literal because they think they're in school, and they want to please the teacher. And I'm like, this is just a way into writing. And so, just try these things. And so talking about the process with them, for me, I get so much out of working with these junior high and high school kids. And normally you couldn't pay me to go into a high school or a junior high and teach. But in this environment where we're in this very historically atmosphere enriched place, and we have fun attached to it, it's a whole different dynamic. And I love it, and I get so much from my students. I try to make prompts that I want to do. I try to change them a little bit. I do have returning students and stuff, and so I change them a little bit so that I can write, because I do write and I do share, and let them see, which is part of the National Writing Project's premise, is teachers letting your students, modeling the behavior you want from them and sharing your writing. So you're like, hey, this is off the cuff. And sometimes it's like brilliant. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I couldn't get past the apple pie on the counter, but I might write about this. You just never know where it's going to lead. And I just happened on that. I was like, well, what I want them to all share, because we only have each other for a week in these instances. And so they need to get to know each other, and, they need to feel like they're in a writing community. And so they have to be comfortable talking to each other, even the introverts. And so it just, one day I was like, you know what, just talk about, what did you get out of it? What did you feel? Or did you get an idea that you want to explore? And sometimes they'll start telling you a story. They're like composing it, but they were, again, getting in the way of what they thought I needed them to put on the paper. And I'm like, write that down. Right, there's your story, write it down. And so it's, these really cool things happen, but I get so much inspiration from these little kids. And it's amazing, because you would think, I don't know, you'd think that you would get more inspiration. I get more inspiration from them in these workshops than sometimes I do with adults who are like very, versed writers.
Thank you for reminding me. I do camps too, and I love that idea of having the sharing bee process. I've never done that. I like that idea a lot. Did you guys did you try online camps at all last summer?
They did some, and they did them internally, so we didn't get to do them, but I do have some camp dates. So if the museum is open, and we can do a lot of outside stuff, and we definitely could distance. And so if people still register their kids, like, I'm teaching face-to-face, I know how to wear a mask, I know how to keep my distance, right? I know where to take us outside where we can take masks off, and so safely distance if that's an option. And so I hope, like, I'm really hoping, because it is I pull onto that mansion, and I'm like, I feel like I've just gone, which is kind of cool to say when you're pulling up to a castle, that I'm going to my summer home, right? Like, where you get to go to, you go to the summer cottage, but this is the summer castle. And it's just a really great thing to look forward to. And they pay me very well. And so it's like this, I feel like I'm being treated like a legitimate writer who has something to give. And I definitely receive back, and in so many ways in my writing, like, I get to write. And right, away from my computer, away from digital distractions, I'm writing in a journal and doing these really cool things that I normally don't take time to do that way. So there's all of those things, but you also help other people. You ghostwrite for other people,
Mhm.
right? And I found that to be a really fascinating. I love it. I don't necessarily like. I'm learning a couple of things. I don't necessarily entirely like the model of one of my big clients that I work with, but I love the process. So, do you have any pointers or anything specific to say about that?
Well, what I love the revision process. That's my like creating things for the first time, the new, the generative stuff. That's not my favorite part. So in a way, helping someone write their story or writing for them or capturing their voice, and that is revising because the story's written in a sense. It's
Oh,
happened.
right.
And so it's simply giving shape to what already exists, which is, I adore that part of the process.
Yeah.
So, so that's a lot of fun. And then, just kind of the, how do I keep their voice,
Hmm.
and, make it something that readers are, that's going to work for readers and all of that kind of stuff. Because a lot of people their natural voice isn't a natural storytelling voice, or it may be what happens more often is they're really good storytellers, like verbally, orally, but that doesn't translate in the same way onto paper. So how do you
Right.
kind of keep both of those things? But
Right.
I love that, and I love. I haven't done it a lot, but the people that I've helped with it, like what the product is so important to them,
Yeah.
that they have something in their hands that they can share with people. And often it's it's they're capturing, like, a lot of times it's a relationship with someone else that is no longer here.
Mhm.
Now they've got this artifact, this concrete thing that's going to last as long as forever lasts with a book. And it's pretty satisfying. So
I agree. I love that. It's so interesting to hear, I'd like to talk to other writers. I love doing these talks because you're saying things that I would never have looked at it that way about how you're kind of revising when you're writing their stories because the stories already exist. And that is really interesting. I love to craft the story for the first time. I love revision too, but they're two totally different beasts.
totally.
And so what I love about these ghostwriting opportunities is getting into their character. And it's really interesting because I have not once written a book that of anybody's life who's like me. And so right now one of my characters is, I think he's a couple, or one character, I say character, one of my clients is he just turned 50. He's a 50-year-old gay man. No, I can never be that, right? That can never be me. And so I'm getting these very interesting insights and being able to get in character. And another one of my clients was an Indian woman who has a very, very privileged life, who's always had privilege, and which was a totally interesting, different type of and writing her migrant story of coming to a new country and learning all of the nuances and just kind of feeling like a clown in this other country and everything in between. Like so many different book projects. Another one of my clients, was Sicilian. I could relate to him the most because of like a lot of the stories he said. I was like, oh yeah, Italians, it's definitely a different breed. But like, I cannot wait to hold his book and go to the towns that I wrote about that are right next to the towns that my mom's family came from, and to be able to like say, I wrote this, I helped bring this to life. And hearing your clients say, which I remember you telling me, oh my God, you captured it. A lot of times crying, like calling me up, sobbing, how did you get it? And making connections in their life that they were like, I never understood why, but you just said it, right? You just wrote this whole book, and in the final lines, you just summed something up I've not been able to wrap my head around for 40 years. And it's like, wow, like, sometimes you're like, ooh, I'm taking risks, but I'm like, you can take anything out you don't want.
Right.
And I love being able to bring those to life and on the page,
Right. Right.
which that's what a lot of people have, or they can tell a story, but then you're going back and you're trying to put it in scene.
Mhm.
You're putting the dialogue in there and people are talking and they're moving about the room. And so that's really an exciting thing also, is trying to make that kind of, so for them, play out like a movie.
Yep. Yep. Well, and what you're describing is comes back to you as a reader.
Right.
You're
Right.
reading their life, and you're finding it's not on the page. You're reading their life. You're finding the the connections and the symbols and whatever, and then you're just rendering it.
Right. That's another good insight. Yeah. So no, I definitely love, like, that is something I do want to pursue more of. I don't know how, right, I'm going to take on more projects like that. I've been working, so I have some news that I've been waiting to share. So I have been working on publishing my self-help book and trying to launch this outreach. And a year ago, I was really aggressive about sending it out, and the pandemic hit. And so I just heard back from a publisher. I'm about to, I already have a package and everything with this self-publishing thing. I haven't done anything with it because they're kind of being lame. And I'm just going to call that a God moment, like, whatever. Slowed things down. I had a lot of problems with some of the things I was working on. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get some stuff in order behind the scenes because, all these things have to get done. And I just talked to him today. I keep checking my email. And so I have a contract on its way with a New York publisher. And I know, so I am so excited to see, what I kind of know what the offer is, but I'm excited to work with a team of people, because part of the frustration, and if you've self-published, so if I'm overwhelmed and I'm trying to learn things that I'm not good at. So I'm trying to do things, but I'm like, I suck at this. I'm not good at this. It looks like it looks like my kindergartner is doing this, and I don't have a kindergartner, but it looks like one of my kindergarten kids did this, and I've been frustrated. And a few days ago, right before, I got this email connected with this guy last week, so I had to sit all week waiting until we could talk today. And probably 2 or 3 days before it happened, I literally I just broke down. I was kind of scream venting to my husband. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. Nothing I can do is going to be good at it. Right. I just can't do it. And I was like, I need a team of people. And and I'm like, I have no problem piecemealing things out. I hired an editor's editor because I'm like, their editors, 3 months, these editors have not gotten back to me. Which is another clue. You think I'm going to publish with you? You can't even get back. You can't even get the editors to tell me that, right, the book is a go. And so I hired an editor's editor because I'm an editor. So I wanted feedback, and I wasn't thinking I was going to get as fabulous of feedback as I was going to get. And she was brilliant. And I will be sharing her name with other people because she had insights into it, very sensible. And the book is so much better. So it's just tighter, things are fixed in it. And so I it's realized, and that's exciting, right? So I've been busy doing those types of things. But yeah, so you'll hear more about this contract when it's I don't want to give names and stuff until I sign it. But I might even do that live, because I might say this is exciting that I'm doing it. So I'm hoping that the experience will be, better. So far, the research I've done with this publisher, the authors have been very pleased, and some of them have. So that's the other cool thing, is I have a potential also to do books in a series with them. Nice. So, right. So if this does well, which I think it will do well, and there's some things that we want to do with it I kind of want to get it in the hands of professionals and outreaches who serve, assault victims. And I'm writing a grant for that right now. So hopefully I can secure some funding and do some fundraising to be able to do that at the pre-sale, stage. And so anyhow, I'm excited because it's a much better situation. And then it gets me thinking about the next projects, which I've been don't do that, right? Don't start thinking about these next projects, because you have to focus on this one, which obviously I was still have to focus on it, but I haven't even allowed myself to even start writing it. That would be, you're trying to serve too many masters here. So.
Exactly. That was going to be my unsolicited advice, was clear the decks. So you have nothing but energy to put this direction, because
absolutely. You should have seen me. I'm like a crazy woman. I had 2 more projects that I was ghostwriting, and I literally just sat with them for weeks and finished these books. And now I'm just wrapping up final phases with the clients, but I'm I need to get myself freed up and not take on any big projects right now, so that I can really focus right? As you can see, I can't really multitask as well as I used to.
And
So
you want to be able to enjoy it too. I mean,
yes,
you probably could do all those things and keep all those balls in the air, but you're only going to have your first traditionally published book once.
right.
So
And I didn't get that experience right the last time. And so yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to what would it be like when somebody else is promoting it. Someone else is right getting the reviews and doing that kind of stuff. Like I don't even know what that feels like. But I'm welcoming it. I do want to know what it feels like. So
very cool. Congratulations. That's exciting.
thank you. Thank you. So yeah, so anything else you want to say in closing? Like anything else you want us to know about your writing life or things that are on the horizon?
I don't really have anything in particular. I think that, I'm not interested in what people know about my writing, but I do hope that they, they're here because either they like reading or they like writing, or they might someday want to write. And I guess I just want to leave them with permission to do it. Like,
Yes.
there's no time like the present. And, it's an important thing. And so I guess that would be my encouragement to others.
Nice. I like that. The teacher, right?
As always. Yeah, exactly.
No, I love that. So, all right. So I want to thank you for such a generous time and so many generous answers. I can't wait to go back and watch this because when you're in the heat of it, you can't absorb it. Like I remember you were saying something about an author and I was like, oh, I got to go back and I didn't want to write anything down. I didn't want to distract myself, but I'm like, I got to go back and listen to this now because I definitely have to read that now that she mentioned it. But so I can't wait to go back and share it or review it. And I will share this on our website, the recording, and it's on my page. So you can just share it if you want people to watch it. The recording will be there. So
Awesome.
and eventually,
This has been so much fun.
thank you. So, and I look forward to collaborating on something else with you in the future, maybe the agent talk or maybe something similar, talking about character or whatever. I'm not sure. If you have ideas, shoot them my way. So
Okay, definitely.
it doesn't have to be my idea. Sometimes I'm like, please, somebody else try. So thank you again. And I look forward to continuing to watch your journeys wherever they take you.
Oh, thank you. And yours too.
Thanks. So, all right, you take care.
Yep, you too.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.